about to be live. So with that, thank you all for joining us, despite being 3 minutes late. I have a very important announcement. If you hug your sick child before going live, that might interrupt the time you can go live, which is what happened here. Don't test in production is basically the learning here. So with that, happy Nomad Day, and welcome back to the Nomad 1.5 community office hours. We've got some exciting stuff here, some exciting features to talk about. But before that, as always, community office hours are a public event, a professional event. Be welcoming, inclusive, and friendly. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Be considerate and respectful. It's really simple. If you see something in the chat that's not cool, our moderators are on standby. Please report it. We've not had these issues. We're not looking to start a trend today, so definitely don't be a trendsetter here. But if you see something, let us know. And if you want the full version of this, check out hashicorp.com/community-guidelines. And with that, James, Peter, welcome back and welcome. Peter, since you're new, I'll go with you first. What do you do and why are you here?
Hi. Yeah, I'm a new member of the, well, I'm not the newest one anymore. I can't play that card anymore. But so I joined the Nomad team, I want to say 9 months ago. I'm a software engineer in the Nomad team, and I've been working together with James on one of the features for 1.5 release. So I understand that this is the main reason why I'm here.
Excellent. We will have quite a few questions for that. James, welcome back. At this point, you're community office furniture, but for those that haven't met you, please give us a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. I do very uncomfortable furniture. My name's James. I'm an engineer on the Nomad team. Been here 3 years now. But before that, I also used to run Nomad in various environments. So have experience writing and running. And so, hey, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I can't hear you, Kerim.
Today's technology has not been kind to me, but I appreciate that. I think we're all doing very well because of one of the coolest new features, and Shantanori brought it up. 1.5 introduces a very nice option. Which one of you wants to take this one? I know somebody else worked on this, but why don't we talk about the banner text a little bit?
Oh, the banner text in the UI. Fabulous stuff. Yeah, really nice. So from anyone that's not familiar, usually Nomad across the top is just a green banner. Pretty nondescript, you know you're on Nomad, but if you have multiple regions, multiple clusters, you might not know what cluster you're on. And so the UI team added a feature where you can customize kind of like next to the Nomad logo in the top left-hand side. You can add a custom piece of information that tells you where you are, what cluster you're on, what region you're in. Just a really nice, simple addition. Well, not simple in terms of writing the code, but simple as in it's just there, it works. You can go and add anything you want in there.
I think great quality of life improvement. Also very nice if you like to style things with emojis. Not that anyone else does that, but it is a possibility. Big feature, of course, was single sign-on, OIDC support. Let's talk about that for a second. First of all, why did we add that?
Which one of us takes this? I will take this. I think, well, so we had a lot of requests from our users, of course. And this has been one of the features that I think has been requested the most over the last years, months at least. And I think that from an operator perspective, of course, it makes a huge, it's a big advantage to the management of the lifecycle of tokens, management of users. It makes things much easier. So I think that, yeah, briefly, that would be the why.
I think it's a good why. It shows a focus on removing barriers to entry. And I mean, as somebody who has had to maintain user directories, anytime I don't need to maintain an additional one and figure out how to sync one to the other, things get a lot easier. I'm excited for that. If I'm not entirely mistaken, my notes say that we have a demo for that one. And I think that's you, James.
I think that might be me. Let's try this, shall we?
So while you get set up with that, I'm curious, for the people joining us in the comments, in the audience, have you used the single sign-on functionality yet? If so, with which provider? And
cool.
How are things? Oh, sorry, I meant this one.
Does this work how we want it to? Is this big enough?
I think so.
Cool. This is going to be a quick demo of SSO using the OIDC workflow, OpenID Connect. And this is going to use auth0. Tutorial coming soon. If you want to test it out, there is also a great Vault tutorial, so you can use Vault as the OIDC provider already out. We will see now. I've got a type in front of people. This will be interesting. I've got Nomad 150 installed. I have a cluster already running with some bits already configured, so we'll go and take a look at that. And so one of the first things you'll probably look at is the auth methods. So these actually configure how Nomad will talk to the remote OIDC provider, in this sense, auth0. And kind of like the rest of the Nomad commands, we have these lists and info sections. And an interesting kind of detail here is we have this concept of default. So when you're setting up your providers, when you're setting up your auth methods, as an operator, you can say, hey, I want the auth0 OIDC provider. I want that to be the default one that Nomad will select. So users that are logging into Nomad don't have to specify the name of the provider they use. And we can have a look at that in detail a little bit more. Oh no, there we go. Hold on. That should be the token that works. Yay. You'll see that we've got lots of kind of custom information, and I'm going to go and delete all of that in a minute. And just the stuff that tells us general information around how the auth method is configured. And so that's great. So that tells Nomad how to go and talk to auth0. But in the OIDC workflow, we get claims back from auth0, from your OIDC provider, that might not map necessarily into Nomad concepts. So, if you're familiar with AD or any kind of, large enterprisey kind of authentication provider, you might have group names and that you're a member of that aren't going to match into your policies and your roles that you have on Nomad. So we also have this new concept. And if you've used console, you might know this, of binding rules, which are used to translate the claims that you get from the provider into Nomad's kind of representative objects, so policies, roles. So again, we can have a look at that. You can see that we've got this one thing here, and you can say, you can give a description, you say which auth method it's assigned to, and then we're going to go and read that. You can see some more information about it. The selector is a Go Bexper expression, so it's a library we use for our filtering. And so what we're saying here is the claims that get returned to Nomad when I authenticate with auth0, within the list of roles, if I'm a member of the project developer roles, I'm a member of that group, however you want to call it, then use this selector. This selector is valid, this selector returns true, and therefore we should use this binding rule for me. And then we have bind type. So we have 3 different bind types you can configure. This is a management one, so this gives me a management token when I log in. This can also be a role or a policy. Again, they map directly to the Nomad ACL constructs of those. And the bind name, because we're using management, we omit that. If it was a role or a policy, it would be the name of that role or policy that we want to assign. And so with those kind of things configured, I've got auth0 configured. I won't go into that now. hope to get the tutorial out in the next couple of days, so I'd recommend looking at that. I can simply run Nomad login. You can have a look at the commands quickly. Lots of stuff I need to sort out this formatting. My bad. But we can give it the name. We don't have to do that because we're using a default. The type. So in this sense, we're going to give it the type of OIDC. If you're familiar with OIDC workflow, we spin up a kind of temporary callback server so that the IDC provider can provide the CLI with the relevant information then to pass on to Nomad, so you can change that if you want. And you can then output your token that you get returned in the format you wish. So I should be able to say OIDC. See how this works. It's long. That's not how I wanted it to work. I'm going to click on this one so we actually see I have to log in. So you can see now I go to Auth0 as my OIDC provider. I get that. I find where my password is stored, which is here. I put that in. And I authenticate with Auth0. You can see I get this splash screen saying, yep, I've signed into my provider. I can now close this window and start using Nomad. And if I close that, you can see here that I successfully logged in via OIDC and Auth0. And we've got all the information here. So you can see I've got my accessor ID, my secret ID. The name, we can't really do too much with the name at the moment, just with the way the formatting is done. So we give it something that at least operators can understand. Hey, it's using the OIDC workflow and it's come from the auth method that's named Auth0. And you can see I've got a management token. And so now I can just go and use this. And it will expire in 10 minutes. So yeah, kind of quick, kind of easy. Don't know if anyone wants me to show them anything else or has questions. But yeah, I mean, looks simple. The work went into it wasn't too simple. But that's what we're trying to aim for, right? A simple UX to use.
I think anything with logins and user directories never is simple to implement. But having tried this one, I'm actually impressed with how simple it was. In the comments, we see a lot of people that are excited to use it with Azure. And of course, Stefan as well. Very nice. Jason, both Active Directory and Okta. Nice. And then, there we go. Always exciting. Always very nice to see. When you use the features, let us know in GitHub Issues if you run into any issues. This is the first release. Of course, we test things internally, but we can test all methods. We may have overlooked a specific setup. Maybe the way you retrieve your roles is different than we anticipate. I have full trust in the people working on this, but report any issues so we can make it better for you and we can make it better for everyone. Feedback is important.
And probably something I should have mentioned. I just drive via CLI. The Nomad UI supports this workflow, is much more pretty than the CLI. So if you go, when you load up the Nomad UI, you can go to, there's like a login button in the top right, and you click that, and it will show you the list of auth methods that you have, and you can click one of those and just follow the same process. A really sweet piece of work, and it was great that we worked together to get that released at the same time.
That is actually a worthwhile thing to check out. So Shantanu has an interesting question. Could the OIDC login work with only Okta to Nomad?
How would that work? I'm confused. So would the Nomad server do the login?
That is actually a good one. Shantanu, feel free to drop a follow-up comment and we'll be able to figure out how this could work. We've definitely seen Okta work, so that is helpful. Are you looking to have your Nomad server authenticate to Okta so it can then retrieve application data? Whatever it is, let us know in the comments.
Because if you're talking about something similar to JWT, then sure, that might work in the future.
Probably, yes, I think it would. Probably wouldn't use Okta for that. I think that personally, I would use it more in the context of logging into Vault and then getting my secrets from there. Mostly because, well, access to all the secrets that my applications need. But of course, give us more context and we'll come up with it. There we go. So Okta groups and then get different permissions in Nomad ACLs.
So I think the important part that we also support something like you can, when you create a authentication method, one of the parameters that you can configure is claim mappings and list claim mappings. So if your OIDC provider, or if your JSON web token, which comes from wherever, right? Maybe from OIDC provider, maybe you just made it yourself somehow. It contains basically it has a bunch of key value pairs, right? So there is really nothing stopping you, I think, from defining arbitrary key value pairs, and as long as you specify in your Nomad configuration for that, there is a way to specify that we document on the ACL authentication method config block. You can specify how do you map those keys from your OIDC provider to the concepts and ACL that Nomad supports. And as James just showed, we also have this concept of binding rules, just like Consul does, that basically tells Nomad, okay, how these concepts from the third-party provider map to our ACL system. So, Shantanu, I think there is nothing that would stop you from mapping Okta groups to have different permissions at Nomad ACL. I think that should work perfectly fine.
And if you can get it to work, show us the code, because I think this would be interesting to see what you're doing. Also, might be a good thing to submit to one of the future Hashi Talks, which we'll share links to at a later point. And then, man, very active audience. I appreciate that. If you have questions, drop them in the comments, because we aim to serve happy customers. I think Nomad's slogan at one point is going to be 99 billion allocations served, which, if you're American, you'll understand. It's the green arches. There we go. Mike had some input on this as well. Super useful. If you're wondering where these things are popping up from, if you're watching on LinkedIn, we're also live on YouTube. If you're on YouTube and wondering why you're seeing LinkedIn folks asking questions, that's why. And yes, this is recorded. It will be on the HashiCorp YouTube channel a bit later. And Timothy had was it Timothy? Somebody had a load shedding question. There we go. Lindley. Apologies. The new load shedding, I think that article went out just yesterday. Gonna see.
Yeah, fabulous article. Blog post went out. Yeah, yesterday. It's a great read if you're interested a bit more around the internals of Nomad, actually. Really cool read.
Yeah, Tim talks about all the behind the scenes stuff that's happening when you're doing your work with Nomad. It's definitely worth reading. I don't think we'll touch upon that today, but if there's interest, we'll just drag Tim in front of a camera and talk about this with him. For now, here's the article, which we'll share in the notes, in the comments. But back to talking about 1.5, if you two are up for it, of course. Dynamic node metadata, also very important. Also supports emoji, in case you're wondering. But what other uses could you imagine?
How do you know these things? I've not tried that.
Accidentally typing on my keyboard.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, dynamic node metadata, I think, was quite a big ask. So previous to 1.5, Nomad node agents, Nomad clients you can set arbitrary key value pairs or key value pairs on them, known as metadata. The problem with that, that was great, but you could only update those values and within the config file, and then you had to restart the client. So a little bit brittle, and you don't really want to be restarting your clients if you really don't want to. So in 1.5.0, we have the use that's where you can update these dynamically, right? So you don't have to restart the client. It's an API call, it's a CLI call, so you can do that whenever you want. And I'm just reading someone's notes, sorry. And so yeah, so it means that, I mean, if you have any system processes running, if you have any jobs that are running that, you know, have kind of unique requirements, you can actually use the dynamic node metadata as constraints in your jobs. So you can update the values whenever you're ready to, and you can have jobs kind of constrain themselves off of those and be used in scheduling decisions. So really flexible, kind of interested to see what people come up with on that, to be honest. It'd be interesting.
Also useful well, other than test emoji, of course, which thank you, Charlie, for supporting me in this. Definitely important. It just gives you flexibility that you might not always have in the traditional way, which I think is what it comes down to. And, you know, if you have your favorite shell script somehow retrieving the rack temperature and adding that in there, then that's cool. If you paid attention to James' UI earlier, he tracks his CPU temperature, because in certain environments, that is important. And there we go. Just quickly checking if there's any new questions. Really active chat. You should be checking this out on YouTube, but not keep LinkedIn running at the same time, because that's going to get really confusing. Job templates, I think, is next on my list to talk about. So first question I got when... One second. The first question I got when we introduced that was, how does Nomad Pack factor into this? What do job templates do, and do they have an API? Well, we already know they have an API, so that's very important. But what do they do?
So can I answer this? Am I allowed to answer this? I'm gonna answer this. Never mind. So I always saw this as a super nice feature that makes it just easier for users to just have a quick, easy start with Nomad. I think that our UI team does a great job, and making Nomad as accessible and as easy. I mean, this is also a kind of one of our main selling points, that Nomad is really approachable and very easy. But writing job spec files can be intimidating to users. So I always thought that this is just something that makes it easier to get a head start. How does Nomad Pack fit into this? And you should ask, because there are some future developments about Pack. So Pack is more, in my mind, maybe Mike Nomad will correct me later, but in my mind, Pack is it is thought of as a more full-featured tool that allows more flexibility, that allows more, that is also aimed more at maybe some programmatic use, as in like a part of automation tooling. I don't think that job templates are made with that in mind. I think that they're more about interactive use as a more like as a guide sort of thing. So that's, in my head, this is the difference.
I think that makes sense. Also, I echoed a shout out to our UI team. If you missed last time's Nomad office hours from about a month ago, we had a couple of UI previews. We talked about some of the features that did land in 1.5, some features that we have planned for future versions. Definitely worth checking out to get some of the insights into what we're planning. But also, we ask for feedback. So if you feel like watching the older version, find us on GitHub Issues, provide some feedback, reference office hours so we know what you're talking about, and hopefully we can make the UI even more user-friendly.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right, so customizable header is, of course, sadly enough, on the changelog, mentioned all the way at the bottom, despite the one thing we started with first. And let me quickly go through the questions. So we've had the temperature, of course, very important. And there we go. That's the one I wanted to pick. So Ivan asks, is it possible to update Nomad clients to 1.5 without draining allocations from the node?
Yes. Yes, you can do that.
I like questions that can be answered like that.
I mean, if you want me to expand slightly, yes, you can kind of replace the binary on the client, restart the process, and Nomad will come back up and reattach itself to your running tasks. So you don't have to do that. We don't expect you to do that.
That definitely works. So one thing I always like to ask when we talk about new releases is, you worked on this release. Any release, anytime you write something, code, blog post, whatever, it's a work of art. It becomes somewhat your child. What's the thing that you're most excited about in 1.5, Peter?
Can I say OIDC SSO? Is that okay to say? I'm going to say it anyway.
Definitely.
I think that was the most exciting for me, because that was also the first major feature that I worked on and the Nomad team. So if there are bugs in it, you know whom to blame. But no, jokes aside, I enjoy working on SSO, and I'm quite happy about this. And I also love the UI updates.
Works for me. These are definitely useful features. I like the quality of life improvements in general. James, what about you?
Kind of as a co-parent of SSO IDC, that was great. But to kind of pick something that maybe is a bit more, not one of the bigger ones, was I'll pick two if I may. The first was that data centers within the job spec. That used to be an array, and that had to match actual data centers you configured. If you've used Nomad, you probably understand DC1, the synonymous DC1. In 1.5.0, that actually supports wildcard and globbing. So now you can just have an array with a single entry of an asterisk, and that will match every data center, which is really cool. Subtle, but really powerful. I think we're all using that already. And the second one I'd really like to call out was the addition recently of adding the Nomad TLS commands, which was done by someone not on the engineering team, but internal, which was great to have that kind of contribution. So thank you, Lance. And that's great. It makes setting up, at least generating the TLS certificates, the CA and the certificates for the clients themselves, just much more easy, much simpler. And I just, having fought with TLS much in my past, that is a really nice addition.
Sadly, not a unique thing. Many people have fought with that. Meanwhile, some comments from Seth, also from the Nomad engineering team. I think upgrading is always a good thing to do if you're at most one version behind. We talk a lot about consistency and code that is predictable, operations that are predictable. That means you can't have a delta to the current version that's too big, because otherwise it's impossible for your applications and for your tooling to know what all the possible changes are. It's keep your stuff up to date, never lag behind, and never lag behind unless you really have a good reason to it. Sometimes you have to, for legal reasons, for other reasons, but whenever you can prevent it, you'll definitely be happier on recent versions. Meanwhile, we're getting a lot of love for the data center wildcard and the various versions of the wildcard. This might actually be my favorite one, because if you're not in the tire fire zone 1, then you can be in all tire fire zones. This is useful. Personally, I would run it in Frankfurt, of course, much easier. Or, as Mike says, well, I mean, who does single DC at this point? So, there we go. Kerim, beautiful picture and comment. Being able to stop multiple jobs at the same time, there we go, is one of the big small things I like from a testing, learning, and debugging perspective. There's a lot of good improvements. Sessions like these are the ones where we get inputs. I think Mike mentioned it earlier. In September, almost 6 months ago, we talked about one of the small features. It ended up in Nomad 1.5. Of course, things don't happen overnight, even though they might happen overnight code-wise. We bring them out as soon as possible and as soon as is sensible. But your input is important to us. We keep harping on that because it is very crucial to us. So James, since you've actually worked with Nomad in real life, I'm curious, as a former operator, what's one thing that you would want to tell people or to teach people and go like, hey, if you're using Nomad, this is really one of the things that you should be thinking about?
Oh, that's a big question. I'll caveat this with, it's been a while since I've run production things in Nomad. So Nomad has changed a lot since I did it. I mean, this goes back probably kind of beyond Nomad and more just kind of general infrastructure operations things. But to me, it was always the idea of having repeatable infrastructure. So where, you build a cluster, you want to build it in an automated way. So if I want to test some new things, I can just kind of spin up a small one. I can run it locally, and you can prove out changes. One of the times it would always go wrong for me is if I just made a change without, testing it, without being able to automate that everywhere. Manual changes are fraught, error prone. So that'd probably be the biggest thing. Something I always harp on about as well is when you take a backup, it's not really a backup until you've proved that it could be restored. So always keep that in mind as well. Whether that's, the raw snapshots that we can take from Nomad, or whether that's just being able to restore your cluster really quickly. I don't know, depends what jobs you're running. If you're just running kind of ephemeral workloads where you can just tear the cluster down quickly and spin it all back up, that is a recovery method. But just make sure you've got them practiced and monitor the right things. We have some good documentation on monitoring around, try and give some tips around what to look at. And the aim there is to try and kind of find information that can kind of bring problems to your attention before they become too bad. Yeah, long, windy answer. Sorry about that.
I think it's a great answer. It definitely helps. Shantanu also has a very good point here. Understand the ports, their protocols. It generally is a thing, and it's hard. A lot of the tooling that comes out these days makes getting into this field of work so much easier. We've drastically lowered the barrier from not basically having to be an electrical engineer to still being able to come in. If you look at our job 10, 20 years ago, you'd have many more storage engineers than you have today. People with dedicated knowledge of flipping a physical connector to get like that little bit of extra speed out. Today, everything is an API. It's beautiful. But it also means that we're further away from that knowledge. And that makes it really hard when you're trying to debug things. So Peter, with that, what's your favorite way of debugging?
I really rely on the logs, and that's probably not the most modern way to answer this question. But yeah, I think when it comes to debugging complex issues, like something that is not very obvious, I would say that if I have good, easy access to logs that that my application produces, but also my orchestrator and my all the tooling that I have, that is probably the very first thing for me. But much like James, it's also been a while since I worked on the operator side, so I know that a lot of people rely on observability metrics and things like tracing these days that really push forward, and like you can pinpoint the location of your problem very quickly if your code is written properly, right? And if you're deploying the right way. So I think that we have a lot of great tools today, but nothing beats readable logs. Nothing beats structured logs as well.
Logging is an art form because it's basically you're teaching your application to write in a way that makes sense with random data that you don't know what's coming. It definitely is. And it's one of those skills that a lot of smart tooling made go away because, like every language these days has this perfect logging package that thinks it knows what you need, except it's missing that one field that you really need. I'm right there with you. Quick shout out also for 1.5, 1.4 and others. We had community contributors such as Danish Prakash, who helped us get new features in. I think Danish was on, gave us the multiple job stopping support. These are great contributions. If you're thinking of contributing to the Nomad code or Nomad Pack or the Terraform provider, it's on GitHub. Fork it, propose it. Definitely propose before you start writing on large features, because it helps for us to know what you're doing and to potentially guide you. But it's definitely something that's welcome.
Yeah, definitely. Just to add to that, like if it's if it's the largest feature, then yeah, like open a GitHub issue and we can start talking around implementation details. But we're always happy to accept new contributions and work with you to get them through. So don't be afraid if there are questions, open questions you have. We're happy to work through them, like through a draft PR. And as Kerim pointed out, we've had some great contributions from community recently. It's been really nice to see. And yeah, we're happy to have more and work with you. It's really nice. For us as well, it's really gratifying to have people work with us on our code. It's a great feeling.
And we generally bring this up during Hacktoberfest, but any contribution is a valid contribution. If you see a typo in the docs, I'm known for these, both making them and sending in PRs to correct them. Those are valid contributions as well, because if you're annoyed by it or if you misunderstood something because of it, then probably somebody else did too. Make the world a better place. I think scouting rule, right? Like leave the place better than you found it.
Also, not forget about the CLI commands typos as well,
which do sometimes happen. Yes, definitely a thing there. Let's see what new questions we have. Shantanu. So first of all, the event timeline shown in the last community office hours is not in 1.5, but it's certainly on our mind. I don't know if I can say more at this point, but if you liked it, that's useful. If there are things that you missed from it, let us know. Helps us shape future versions of Nomad. And then, there we go. Could we have non-positional command line parameters for Nomad? Peter, since you laugh most, I'm gonna let you take this one.
I think Seth really answered this, that there is only a limited amount of miracles that we can make happen. Shantanu, it's a complex change for us to. It's not something that hasn't been discussed, but it is a large change for a bunch of low-level technical reasons that it's not on our roadmap currently. I mean, we hear the feedback here. Yeah, exactly. Charlie just mentioned that the way that the kind of underlying library that we use for our CLI, which we cannot easily get rid of, makes it very, very difficult for us to make that change. So the rewrite in Zig is, of course, happening next. I think in 2 weeks there will be the Zig rewrite release. But so when that happens, yes, of course. But
I think we're planning to announce that at the tail end of March, beginning of April, right? Yeah. Well, until then, you're still going to be very firmly in the Goland, not the IDE, but in this just doesn't connect. So, what else are you excited about in 1.5? And what features would you like to see happen next? You two specifically. James.
Oh, that's a tough question. What feature would I like, and what didn't? Well, I'm really stuck on that. There's a couple of bugs or kind of small enhancements that I raised when I was an operator that I kind of want to fix. I just not had the time. So things like how we do. So we have the TLS commands that were added, which is great, but can we actually improve the overall story for TLS and make it so that maybe you don't have to worry about configuring it? At least make that experience a lot easier to manage. It's not coming in 1.6, I don't think. But that would be something I would like to see in the future. I think that would be really nice. And I think it strengthens our position and implementations whereby you don't have to worry about TLS. TLS is still a bit annoying to set up. And so people will probably be forgiven for not maybe using TLS straight away. That would probably be the one thing I would pick.
I think that's definitely a great one. Peter, better logging support?
No, it's great already. I think so. I have two. I have one is more user facing, and that's it's actually something that the team has been concentrate. Like there's been some efforts on this. So I mean Nomad Pack. I think Nomad Pack, and yes, I am working on Nomad Pack right now. But I think this has been it's a part of the story that we I think are maybe missing a little bit. So you know, people have a love-hate relationship with Helm on the Kubernetes side, of course, right? So, but it is a very, very useful tool, no matter what how much you hate it. And Nomad Pack has been, I think it needs some love, and I think it needs some more support from the team, and I think I would like to also, you know, I would like to see Nomad Pack to be better. And the second one is I've been asking this. I've been talking to Tim about this, and I've been talking to Luis about the code that we have inside of our low-level scheduler, and there are some code there that everyone is scared of, and it is my dream that we could maybe rewrite it a bit and refactor it to make it more readable. I don't know. That's not user facing at all. So that's not gonna end up on. But maybe it's gonna make a blog post or something.
These blog posts are definitely worth reading. So I would encourage you to write that. And definitely more love for Pack is always nice. I think, yes, it's still a tech preview, but it does have a very nice feel to it. For me, I enjoy writing packs way more than I enjoy writing traditional job spec files. I don't know why, but it just works. It definitely helps. As Josh says, enjoying the discussion, definitely. Also, thank you to our audience who's bringing in very, very good questions and keeping us on our toes. And Danielle, the wishlist feature should be get rid of Docker and integrate it into Nomad Agent. How would Podman sound to you? Would that work? If so, let us know in the comments. If ultimately it's up to you to choose how you want to run your workload. Doesn't have to be through that one binary. It can be through another. It could be through a different mechanism at all. And well, there we go. Where is it? Some more questions to talk about. James, thank you for joining us. And James, question for you. Is there a plan to make workload identity conform to OIDC?
That really confused me. Hey, James. I'm unaware of workload identity plans at the moment. I've been pretty heads down. So hopefully someone might be able to answer that in the chat. We do have a lot of plans for workload identity going forward, though. So I'd imagine if we can, and if that makes sense, then we'll definitely put that part of the roadmap. But yeah, workload identity is one of those things that kind of popped up, and I didn't pay a huge amount of attention to it. And the more I learn about it, the more great it sounds in terms of Nomad's use case at the moment. So yes, I don't have a concrete answer, but I'd hope so.
It is on our mind, I think is a good one. Ivan has another question for us. It would be nice to be able to move allocations to a different node. Of course, hardware fails, network connectivity fails. Sometimes you just need to shift around. What do we think about this?
It would be nice, for sure.
I think what Charlie said in the chat is the thing that makes sense. It breaks the scheduler story. It's kind of, Nomad works very heavily on the fact that the servers and scheduler make the decisions around where things are placed. And when we start messing with that, then it becomes difficult. But it would be pretty cool. I know other people have also talked about, I think there's an issue open around rebalancing. So, you've got a cluster that's been running for quite a while, and maybe you've got some clients that are pretty heavy on their workload. It would be nice to kind of run a rebalancing command and say, hey, let's just make sure everything is how we want it to be. But again, that's a very tricky one, I believe.
I think it's also the hard part with this kind of thing is always how much you want the scheduler to handle and be able to almost predict what you're trying to do versus what should you be telling the scheduler to do. If you're end-of-lifing hardware, then you should technically be draining it and then rescheduling it. But of course, that may result in a service outage, which on its own, usually not desirable. And not everything loans itself to be used, with a load balancer in front of it. I guess this comes down to do it at 3 a.m. and shift it over at that point when nobody else is using it. Which of course, 24/7 economy, is that really a thing still? People just want their weekend. This is an interesting one. What would a defrag command do in this case? Just more bin packing? Let's take this one for a second. Peter looks like he has an idea.
I mean, yeah, if you wanted to do this manually, then we of course don't really have it. But so the scheduler in a way does this defragmentation continuously. Like there's this reconciliation that happens continuously that is effectively like making sure that the desired state matches the fragment and pack up all the allocations. Yeah, if I don't really know how that would look like. James, help me out here.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
If you're using the bin packing scheduling algorithm, I guess what the expectation would be that we repack everything so that you have higher density, whilst adhering to all of your constraints that you have. The silly side of me just thinks that it will bring up this lovely terminal that has lots of pretty colors and they start moving around for you. But in essence, that's what's going to happen to the allocations, right? They get moved. Conversely, if you're using spread, we're going to spread out further across your node. If in the use case you have hot nodes, hot clients, it would do that. It's an interesting one though. If anyone has ideas, there's an open issue around rebalance, so please go and put your kind of thoughts or use cases on that, because that'd be cool to know.
Well, I have two things to that. One, I would absolutely love just having my terminal open and seeing colored blocks shift from one side to the other. I've been hoping for that since I saw my very first hacker movies, obviously the very important war games and all the others. We're still not there. People simulate it in the browser. It's not the same. I want my infrastructure to be like that. Just slide things around. Be nice. And of course, if this is something you're excited about, just join us at Hashi Days so you can talk to our engineers about that. June 13th, London, Paris, Munich, or if you don't want to or cannot travel, online, head on over to hashidays.com, get yourself a ticket. We'll have interesting announcements, obviously a lot of good networking, and as far as I know, the best event coffee that I've ever had with some of my favorite roasteries. And yes, Shantanu, you definitely asked the tough questions, and I think that makes a more interesting discussion for us. So keep them coming, not just today, just in general. And while we're on the note of how UIs could look like and envision that, maybe we just need to do another UI episode like we did a month ago, and not let us be constrained by what people expect. Just lead the future by making it look very 1980s. Interfaces were glorious. I think the closing note here should be, Peter, what's your recommended hacker movie that people must watch or book?
Yeah, war games is, how can you not? I remember that we had a team member that did not see war games, and was then, it was that team member was scolded for not having watched this movie. Yeah, it's obligatory.
It's almost it's onboarding material. James, what about you? We're glossing over the war games discrepancy here.
I'm a fan of kind of the cyberpunk dystopian books. So something kind of like The Peripheral, which maybe people know from Amazon Prime, a fantastic book, or something like Snow Crash, which is the precursor to the metaverse. It called it out years ago. So one of those two I pick.
I think Snow Crash is definitely an interesting one. I remember reading it and thinking like, this must be the business plan for Second Life, back when Second Life was a much more active thing than it was for the years following that. Before we close out, one last question from Danielle. Currently, volumes are created using independent manifests. is there a plan to create volumes from under a Nomad task to make stateful workloads more scalable? And I'm going to add to that, if we plan on adding something to that, will we expand that to Pack as well?
I'm going to say I think we have a plan. Don't quote me on that. But yes, some aspects of that. And then I'll let Peter handle the second part of that question.
So I can say that for now there is no plan to be able to do that in Pack. We have a couple of improvements for Pack on the roadmap. That is not one of them, but I mean, hearing this feedback for sure something that we could consider, but I can't really make any promises. It's not something that we've been planning.
But it's feedback that helps us shape our products. And ultimately, that's what matters. With that, any closing words from either of you? Because if not, I'm going to say thank you all for joining us. Thank you, James. Thank you, Peter. Come back next time when we'll talk about, maybe we'll get Tim in here. And with that, have a great one.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.